She was the kind of neighbor you couldn't complain about without sounding petty. Always smiling, always baking something sweet, always showing up at just the right time with a basket of muffins or a too-perfect pie. But underneath all that syrup was vinegar. I used to think her generosity was genuine, that she was just one of those overly friendly types who couldn't help herself. But it wasn't kindness. It was leverage. That pie? It always came after she used my hose without asking. Those cinnamon rolls? Right after she borrowed my patio chairs for her niece's birthday. I didn't mind, not at first. I told myself it was neighborly to share, that little favors were just how communities worked. Until the day I found her SUV parked across my garage for the third time in a single week. She wasn't even subtle about it. Just parked, angled like a barricade, then jogged off to her yoga class without a second glance, waving like this was all part of our usual routine. That's when it clicked. This wasn't thoughtless. It was intentional, calculated. The smile wasn't an apology. It was a smug declaration that I'd let it happen again, and she knew I wouldn't do a thing about it. I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at that car like it had insulted me personally, and in a way, it had. I wasn't just blocked in. I was dismissed, erased, treated like my space didn't matter, like my needs didn't register. And the worst part? I had seen this coming. My husband, Ben, warned me about her. Years ago, before the illness stole him away, he said, "Karen's the kind of person who counts your kindness like credit, but never intends to pay it back." I laughed it off back then. I didn't want to believe it, but standing there in my driveway, boxed in again, I realized Ben had been right all along. That fake concern at the funeral. The Facebook post 2 hours later complaining about traffic during the procession. The time she volunteered my backyard for her book club without asking, and then acted surprised when I got home early. Every little thing that made me feel crazy for caring. It had all been a pattern, and I was done being part of it. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, letting every memory rise up like steam from a kettle that had been whistling too long. The fence she made me fix, the garage I mopped for her after her water heater burst, the way she called me sis with that syrupy tone, like we were family. She didn't mean it, not really. I was convenient, dependable, and invisible, but not anymore. Something inside me clicked into place, slow and certain. No yelling, no confrontation, just the quiet finality of a decision that had been building for years. At sunrise, I pulled on my overalls, tied my hair back, and stepped outside with a fresh cup of coffee in one hand and my gloves in the other. The air was crisp, still. I could hear the world waking up, birds, sprinklers, the faint whir of someone else's lawnmower starting. Karen's SUV still sat there like a dare, and for the first time, I didn't feel helpless or small. I felt focused. I walked past her car, not even giving it a second glance, and headed toward the barn where Ben's old forklift was tucked away beneath a tarp. It hadn't been used in a while, but he maintained it like it was part of the family. Said it ran like a warhorse, and it did. The engine roared to life with a low growl that felt like thunder rolling through my spine. I tested the forks, adjusted the angle. Everything still worked. Everything was ready. Sliding the metal arms beneath the car took more precision than I expected, but it came back to me in pieces. How Ben used to teach me when I helped him in the shop. How he'd say, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. I tilted the SUV just right to accommodate the slope, then lifted. Inch by inch, it rose like it was being summoned to judgment. The tires left the pavement with a soft sigh, and for a moment, it looked like it might float. No rage, no chaos, just the clean, deliberate act of correcting what should have never been tolerated in the first place. The garage roof wasn't just decorative. Ben had reinforced it back when he talked about turning it into a rooftop garden. It had a ramp on the far side she never bothered to notice. Perfect slope. Perfect access. With a steady hand, I drove the forklift up. The car balanced like a prize on a platter. I parked it right in the center of the roof, turned off the engine, and stood back to admire my work. And it didn't look wrong. Not one bit. If anything, it looked like it belonged there. Like the arrogance that had driven it had finally been displayed in the only way it could be seen. I didn't leave a note, didn't send a text. There was nothing left to say. When she came looking, she'd know. She'd understand. Maybe not why, but that she had finally crossed the line, and someone had drawn one in return. An hour later, the neighborhood began to stir. I sipped my second cup of coffee on the porch, calm and steady. Then I heard her, the slap of flip-flops, the voice that carried like nails on glass. She was on the phone, probably already complaining to someone. She didn't even notice the forklift or glance at the roof. She knocked on my door, like always, like she still believed she was entitled to be heard. I didn't move. I wanted her to feel the silence, to hear the absence of welcome where warmth used to live. Then she noticed. She stopped mid-step, craned her neck, and looked up. Her face froze. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. She looked around, pointed like she was witnessing a magic trick gone wrong, then screamed my name like I owed her something. Still, I didn't move. I just watched as she spun in circles, her panic rising with every second the car remained perched above her, like a billboard of humiliation. She didn't understand it yet, but everyone else did. Neighbors started peeking out. Some took pictures. No one rushed to help. No one spoke. Because for the first time, someone had pushed back. And it wasn't just about parking. It was about everything. She stormed the sidewalk, demanding someone do something. Call the police. Call the HOA. Call anyone who would punish the woman who dared say no. But all she got were blank stares and a few amused smirks. The power she once held, built on fear, on whispers, on social credit, was evaporating in real time. She was loud, but her volume didn't matter anymore, because for once, the message had already been sent. And it was written in steel, 10 feet off the ground. The police arrived just before noon, 2 cruisers, lights off, the kind of visit meant to diffuse tension, not inflame it. Karen was already pacing the sidewalk like a furious actress mid-performance, arms flailing, voice pitched high enough to rattle the neighborhood dogs. She met the officers at the curb with a mixture of tears and theatrics, waving toward the garage roof as though she'd discovered a crime scene. The officers, to their credit, remained calm. One walked around the house, the other came to speak with me. I didn't panic. I didn't protest. I simply handed him the security footage, clean, time-stamped, indisputable. There she was, parking across my garage without permission for the 3rd time in 1 week, flipping her hair and walking off like the space belonged to her. The officer nodded, handed it back, and said nothing more. Karen was still demanding justice when they returned to her, pointing and gesturing, insisting on pressing charges. But the officers weren't buying what she was selling. They asked her plainly, was the property hers? Number. Did she have permission to park there? Also, number, did I damage the vehicle? It was parked neatly, unscratched, just relocated to a place she didn't expect. The word civil matter came up, and her face dropped like someone had cut the string holding her composure. She exploded, not with tears this time, but with pure fury, accusing the officers of enabling harassment, of letting someone unstable terrorize her. One officer hid a smirk. The other simply said, "Ma'am, we suggest resolving this through your HOA or a lawyer." And that was the moment the performance cracked. For hours afterward, she marched up and down the street, knocking on doors, calling out to anyone who would listen. But no one did. Not really. Most closed their blinds. A few shrugged, and a few smiled. The thing about people like Karen is, they rule through intimidation and manipulation. But once you remove the illusion of power, the empire crumbles. She wasn't feared anymore, just pitied. By sunset, her car was still on the roof, and she was on the verge of collapse. I watched as she tried to flag down a tow truck, offering cash, then raising her voice when the operator refused. Without a court order, no one wanted to touch the situation. Liability, they said. She cursed, threatened lawsuits. But no one was listening anymore. Her audience had vanished. The next morning, the street felt different. Not quiet exactly, but lighter. The tension that had knotted the cul-de-sac for years was unraveling. Kids played louder, dogs barked freely. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now waved as they passed. And Karen. She was nowhere to be seen, shades drawn, doors shut. Her silence wasn't peaceful, it was calculating. That woman didn't know how to let things go. She just regrouped. So when a sleek black SUV rolled up to her house the following afternoon, I knew exactly what it meant. A lawyer. Young, sharp, too polished for suburbia. He carried a briefcase and the kind of self-assuredness that said he'd charge by the hour and billed for every minute. They talked for nearly an hour inside. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. She pointed toward my house more than once. He scribbled notes. On his way out, he paused to glance at my property. Clinical, assessing. Not friendly, just measuring the size of a problem. 2 days later, the envelope arrived. Stiff white, hand-delivered. Inside, 6 pages of legal jargon, cease and desist, claims of emotional distress, accusations of vandalism and defamation. I read it slowly, twice, then laid it gently on the table and smiled. Because Karen didn't know that Ben had prepared me for this moment years ago. In the attic was a meticulously labeled cabinet, filled with documents he'd kept. Blueprints of the garage, roof weight tolerances, the forklift certification papers, a maintenance log. Every bolt, every beam, documented. He always said, paperwork beats drama. That night, I gathered everything, scanned copies, and called a friend of Ben's. Evelyn, a retired lawyer, who still took cases when the nonsense piqued her interest. When I handed her the packet, she flipped through it silently, then looked up and asked, "Do you want to end this quietly, or make her wish she never started it?" I didn't even blink. "Let's make it memorable," I said. We filed a full counterclaim within 24 hours. Not just a defense, evidence of repeated trespassing, documented harassment, security footage, even HOA emails where Karen admitted to past behavior. The icing on the cake, statements from neighbors. Claire, the woman who brought the casserole. The elderly man Karen once berated for leaving his recycling bin out too long. Even the couple with the rainbow flag she tried to find during Pride Month. Evelyn's response wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, ruthless in the way only truth can be when delivered without apology. That's when the real shift happened. Karen didn't knock anymore, didn't storm my sidewalk. The Lexus still sat on the roof, gathering dust and bird droppings. But now it was more than a symbol. It was her surrender. The silence that followed was deafening. She kept to herself. Windows dark, lawn unkempt for the first time in years. And the neighborhood. It bloomed. Not overnight, but steadily. Weeds were allowed to grow a little longer. Sidewalk chalk lingered for days. People stopped whispering and started living. One evening, there was a knock. Not at my door, but the side gate. I hesitated, peeked. It wasn't Karen. It was a young woman, early 20s maybe. Said her name was Lily, Karen's niece. She had kind eyes and a quiet voice. Said she was visiting to help her aunt with some paperwork, that she'd heard about The incident, though not from Karen directly. Just fragments, whispers, social media. She asked if she could talk, not to accuse, just to understand. I nodded and offered her a chair on the porch. She didn't try to defend her aunt, didn't make excuses. She just listened, really listened. I didn't go into every detail, I didn't need to. I told her it was about dignity, not drama, about boundaries. That sometimes the biggest fights are the quiet ones, the ones where you don't yell, you just stop bending. She nodded slowly, eyes wet, said she hoped her aunt might learn something from this. I told her it wasn't about learning, it was about changing. And change only sticks when you're humble enough to admit you need it. Before she left, she paused and said, "Thank you." Just that, nothing more. A week later, the restoration team came. Not a tow truck, an actual crew, the kind with permits and precision. They removed the SUV carefully. No damage, no drama. Just a quiet end to a loud chapter. The garage roof looked bare without it, like a stage after the curtain falls. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Karen never said a word. No apology, no note. But sometimes silence is all the admission you need. And for the first time in years, the air on my street felt breathable. The days stretched on, steady and soft. People started gathering again. Claire invited me to a small cookout. Burgers, music, kids playing without worry of a complaint. We laughed, we shared stories. Not about Karen, but about life. The kind of gathering she used to shut down with a single phone call. Now her windows stayed shut. Her house was a shadow of its old self. Quiet, sealed off, forgotten. No one missed the way it used to be. And I stood near the edge of the yard, sipping iced tea, smiling without meaning to. It wasn't triumph. It was something deeper, a return to peace, to place, to myself. The following weekend, I found myself in the barn, standing next to the forklift. It was quiet, parked under its tarp, as if nothing had ever happened. But something had, and it wasn't just about the car or the conflict. It was about power, taking it back, quietly, firmly, without asking permission. I touched the handle, ran my fingers over the initials Ben had carved. And I knew. The story wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. And how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop letting people take pieces of you they didn't earn.